This episode of White Coat Warriors is brought to you by Delta G Ketones. Whether you're on the front lines of healthcare or hitting the gym, Delta G Ketones provide you with the clean, sustained energy you need to perform at your best cognitively and physically. To experience the benefits of the exogenous ketones, visit deltagketones.com and use the code WCW20 at checkout for 20% off your order. That website again is Delta G Ketones, DeltaGketones.com. Now on with the show. The views expressed by myself and the guests of this podcast do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. Welcome to White Coat Warriors. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Myers. And on this podcast, we talk about human performance optimization and training paradigms for you, the young medical professionals, and how you can use it in your own professional practices to help yourselves and your clients. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Chris Myers, and welcome back to another White Coat Warriors episode. Here on WCW today, we're going to be talking about data science. And today we have the pleasure of talking with Jacob Behara, a tactical data scientist. Hey, Jacob, welcome to the episode.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm really excited to be here, and this is going to be a new environment for me because normally I'm talking to strength coaches on podcasts, and so talking to PhDs and to potential med students and residents.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, same here. I mean, this is a new realm for many of us. So before we kind of get into that and talking to like the nitty gritty of data science, again, I'm a numbers guy too. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in Oklahoma. Was there for about 29 years of my life. Went to Oklahoma State University. Got my bachelor's and my master's. I guess before that, I played baseball in high school. Wasn't very good, but that was my sports. Played all kinds of sports growing up, and it kind of led me into the human performance aspect of my career, and like what I'm interested in. So so went to Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cutting in and out.
My headphones are like muting automatically for some reason.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Do you want me to just go off audio off the computer?
Okay. Let's go ahead and put a pause. Hey, Della, what are your thoughts? Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Chris Myers here with another episode of White Coat Warriors. Today here on WCW, we have the great pleasure of talking with Jacob Behara, a data scientist. Yes, today we are going to talk numbers and how to best use them. So we're going to pick Jacob's brain here a little bit, see what his thoughts on data science and how do you use science to help make decisions. Jacob, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. I'm super excited to be here. This is going to be something new to me. So I normally talk to strength coaches and human performance experts. So it's going to be interesting to be able to dive into the medical realm. I'm excited.
Yeah, same here. I mean, data drives a lot of our decisions and how it's being used. And this is just exciting stuff. So before we get into numbers, let's tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I grew up in Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma State University, played baseball in high school. I wasn't very good, but it kind of my background's in human performance, and that's what I still do. So that's it kind of got me started into being interested in athletics because I played all kinds of sports growing up. So went to Oklahoma State, became my bachelor's in dietetics. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades in terms of my professional background as a strength coach, and then for the past 5 years I've been working with the tactical population with the Air Force and Army in the data realm. So been all over. My strength and conditioning background is was with professional baseball and college athletics, and then a company called Exos, and then and now I've been working with like I said, the Army and the Air Force. So working with wearables, working with mostly human performance data, and then recently some cool TBI stuff. So I'm excited about it, and it's been I pitch myself every day because I'm like really excited to where I am, and I don't know how I got here, but somehow I made it.
That's great. So what really interested you in getting into data science, especially with your dietetics and ex-phys and strength coach background?
So it was kind of crazy because I fell into it. So I was working at Exos at the time, which is for those who
Mhm.
don't know, Exos is they do a lot of combine training with NFL
Yeah.
athletes, and then they also I worked at a hospital, so we were contracted to work with high school athletes,
Okay.
some club sports, and then general population. But before that, that was like kind of the end of my career to being a strength coach. But got a call from a CEO that I worked with at my previous company, and he said, "Hey, are you interested in doing sports science with Air Force?" And I was like, "Yes." And plus, it was like a 20% raise. So I was like,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm going. I'm finally getting a tactical realm, and it kind of just like I just kept going. I started
Yeah.
out just to be a data collector, and then work. And I was like, man, this is not really doing anything. You just collect data and not do anything with the data. So I
Yeah.
started moving in. About a year and a half later, I started learning how to, you know, clean data, analyze data, visualize data, and then I've just kind of evolved into eventually making it into what my job is called, a data scientist. I wouldn't consider myself just a complete data scientist, more of a data analyst / data
Mhm.
scientist. I'm not doing complex algorithms or machine learning. I don't even know if we're there yet in terms of the human
Yeah.
performance aspect. So we can go into the difference between an analyst and a data scientist, but it's definitely like a combination of being trying to be an expert and all
Mhm.
and using, well, I guess we can get to it in a little bit, but using the data to whether they predict things or show longitudinal analysis or correlation, and then data science would be more of like cleaning, modeling the data, setting up pipelines for the data, and then doing complex algorithms and machine learning. So they're
Yeah.
different, but I would say most people are more of a combination than just strictly data science or
Yeah.
data.
Okay. Very cool. So with that, it's um there's a lot to unpack there, and we'll get into some of that, right? So, but what is some of the type of data that you collect and you look at on a daily basis?
So currently, it's not it's not the coolest data. A lot of it is, and I have to be careful with what I talk about. But
Yeah.
I'll give them the cool stuff first. So the first cool stuff is sleep data. So
Okay.
wearables. So I'm not going to say
Aura.
which which company, but I'm not going to disagree or agree with what you just said.
Yeah.
So working with sleep data from a massive perspective, like
Okay.
thousands of soldiers. So it's been very very cool
Mhm.
to be able to show how the data is over time. And what I've come to understand, especially with the sleep data, is that just giving somebody a wearable does not do anything for them. And that is
Okay.
like kind of my passion now is if you're going to give out sleep wearables to whether your population, the number one thing you should do first is education.
Mhm.
Because somebody
Okay.
looking at data and not knowing what it means, whether it be sleep efficiency, HRV, heart rate data, um, the algorithms that make up recovery scores, all that stuff, like without them understanding what that means, it really doesn't do a lot for them besides tell them that they're either sleeping great or sleeping like crap.
Okay.
That's really the coolest thing I've been working with recently. So my background was like it wasn't just collecting the data; it was setting up the data or setting up the
Well,
technology, inventory the technology, like doing everything possible, and then getting into the collection process. So
okay.
it was a big lift, but it's very cool with what we're trying to do with it. And I think we made some mistakes, but
Yeah.
it's like just getting the rings on the fingers was a huge win, and now we're trying to utilize it more.
Yeah. That fitting process is for large populations is interesting. I've been there in your shoes on that one. Yeah, and I'm glad that you kind of talked that because that's been a central theme that we've talked about on the past couple of podcasts is how our senior medical students and residents how they can optimize sleep and such, and that, especially in the short period of time they may have. And it's the same thing in the tactical populations. It's and as you very well know, they may only have 4 or 5 hours to sleep. So how can you optimize that short period of time, you know, with that as well? And so given some of that data, in generalistic terms, right, what are some of the, with that data, I wanted to ask what lessons learned, but I know we probably can't get into that. How do you utilize that data to kind of inform leadership decisions, if you can speak to that at all?
Yeah, so we really haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay.
So right now, to be honest with the military, if you can't put it on a plane or put it on a soldier and ship them to overseas, it's not the priority. So human performance is it. The thing is, humans are greater than hardware. That's the soft truth. And but honestly, it's something that I think we need to continue to work on, and that falls on the human performance professionals to get buy-in from leadership. So I made dashboards to show to leadership. The goal is to get it to them. Right now, it's not. I just can't walk up to a geo's office and say, "Hey, here, look at this data. It's really important." It's harder than that. So,
okay.
So right now, from a leadership standpoint, the way I want to use it is showing them, hey, I think I could say this about, I would say in terms of general population and military, it's about 30% of the population gets under 6 hours of sleep, which anything under 7 hours is considered sleep deprivation.
Yep.
And I know people were like, whoa, that's crazy. Like 7 hours? Like, yeah. Anything under 7 hours is you're especially if you're working out hard and you're really pushing your body, whether it be, being a medical student and being in residency and like working a ton and like being under a huge amount of stress. Like if you're not getting 7 hours of sleep, you're most likely not gonna be able to retain information. You're not gonna have emotional control. You're not gonna see the gains of a gym that you want to see. You might, but you're also like draining your body battery. So you're just gonna keep knocking yourself down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So sorry for the tangent, but that's just
no, that's great.
That thing is important for people to understand.
Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because on a previous podcast, we had strength coach Constantine Delgadas. He said the same exact thing. So it's great to hear it from a strength coach and from a data scientist talk about the same exact thing in almost the same exact words. And I know you two don't know each other, so that's what makes it even more spectacular. So that's a really great point. And then one of the other things that you mentioned, so you could collect all the data. It could be meaningful. We'll talk about how you choose the data that you collect here in a minute. Because that's a big question I want to get to. But what is your process on visualizing the data for the client, right? Because you have to make it meaningful that they understand. So if you could speak to that, what's your process on doing that, and what are some of your lessons learned on the visualization aspects of data?
So, I try to keep it really, really simple, because when you're presenting to, high level leadership, or even lower level leadership and just lower level soldiers, like it needs to be simple that they can understand it. Like if you're going to do some type of complex visualization that they're not going to understand, then you're kind of wasting your time. So really it's just showing change over time, averages, standard deviation. I make some bell curves just to show so they can see kind of where they're falling in the population.
Okay.
Pie charts, just simple stuff to say, hey, I think the biggest thing that we made, the biggest thing that I made was just a pie chart saying, hey, 30% of the population gets under 6 hours of sleep. So I think that was like an eye opener for leadership. It was like, oh, wow. Yeah, they see the 70% are getting above 6 hours, but 30%, let's say if we have, I'm not saying we can extrapolate this all over the DoD, it's different everywhere, but if we do extrapolate it over the hundreds of thousands of soldiers that we have, that's a huge amount.
It is.
Yeah. So
it's all about combat regeneration and that mission readiness. So that's a third of your mission. That's the third of your available forces. So yeah, that's good. So the KISS principle, I love it. Yep. Because I've seen, some of these platforms out there. There's some really good data platforms, out besides MATLAB, which if you're a MD PhD, you'll hear of that. There's one that I've worked with called Teamworks, Smartabase. They're bought over, and it's really good at presenting data, but you could really get complex. And I remember the one that I built, we were collecting CGM data with Aura Ring data and overlaying it, really trying to show over a 24-hour period, really kind of show these changes over time. It was good, but it was too complex because you're talking a 24-hour period with, with the Super Sapiens CGM. It was given minute data. So it was getting really complex. We had to break it down into 4-hour chunks. Yeah. But it's you can do a lot with it. So, and we've kind of been talking around it with biowearables. You can pretty much collect almost everything. And let's take the clinical portion out of it, right? Because there's that clinical talk versus the human performance field where it has to be very, you have to be with a very specific deviation for clinical grade, little things like that. So we're not going to have that conversation because I think that's another podcast in itself. It's really great to talk about. But what is your process to determine the metrics to collect? Because I think that's probably the basic question that we all miss. And it's kind of it's the same question I had, same discussion I had with some leadership yesterday. So I want to get your thoughts on that, especially someone who deals with data day in and day out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's something that's very important. So the first thing I look at is what you said. You talked to leadership about it, and one, talking to leadership and also talking to subject matter experts. So I don't determine what I'm collecting. Okay. I talk to experts because you could say I'm not an expert in strength and conditioning, but I was a strength coach. My bachelor's in dietetics, so I can speak to most of the data. But when it comes to like psychological data, when it comes to like family programs data, when it comes to spiritual data, like I am not an expert in that. So I need to go, and even with strength conditioning or nutrition, I'm going to go to the expert and say, hey, what do you want to see? Because if I make it myself and like, hey, I think this is cool, they could be like, I don't care about that. It doesn't make sense to me. So I try to lean on the subject matter experts. I try to take my background to understand their language, but I try not to interject unless it's something that I'm an expert in. So when it comes to sleep, like that's something I'm really passionate about and really trying to learn on. When it comes to nutrition and psychology and stuff like that, like I'm going right to the experts. What do you want to talk about? Can you explain to me? Can you give me the context of what's going on so I understand it, and then I can apply it a little bit better? But that's kind of what I do first. The next is finding if the data is actionable, scalable, repeatable. So shout out to Lyle Danley, who's one of the data scientists. If you know who that is, I told him I was going to shout out because he posted that the other day, and I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I saw the same thing. Yeah, I love that saying.
Yeah, it was really good. So he might probably get it from somebody else, but shout out to Lyle.
I know we're talking about a lot of great topics today, but let's take a quick break to discuss our amazing sponsor, Delta G Ketones. Delta G Ketones delivers all the energy you need without the crash. It's perfect for long shifts, intensive workouts, or any time that you might need a mental or physical boost. Head over to deltagketones.com and use the code WCW20 at checkout for 20% off your order. That website again is Delta G Ketones, DeltaGketones.com. And now back to the show.
And it doesn't meet those requirements, so we got to find out, what does.
Okay.
So the first thing is like, why are you collecting the data in the first place? Like, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
You need to work backwards from the end, and then you can figure out what you need in the beginning. But if you're just starting out, I think it would be cool to collect sleep data. Like that's not a good reason to collect sleep data.
Yeah.
If you did a questionnaire with your force, and you're like, and you can say like, hey, are you sleeping? What's your efficiency like a Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index or something like that? And you find out that you think there is an issue, then I would say get the objective information first. But I really like something that's scalable as well. So I really like we talked about like sleep wearables. I think it's easy to scale that to the population, and it's repeatable because it's a passive way to collect information.
Really?
They're just wearing it at night. They can wear it in the day if they want, but just wearing it at night. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to fill out a questionnaire. They don't have to I don't know if you know what a mega wave is, but a mega wave is like, you don't have to like lay on the ground for 5 minutes and get this system and your heart rate and your heart variability and stuff like that. It's just passive. You just wear it. And so that's why I really like wearable technology, whether that be like heart rate monitors or something like the person doesn't have to do extra. So that's kind of like my process. And then like, yeah, it's probably what the main things I'll look at. And if we can't do those things, then I'll, we need to find either a better piece of technology or another set that we can
Okay.
learn.
Yeah. And that's a lot there, but I love the fact that you said actionable, scalable, repeatable. Yeah, and those are key things that there's different terms. Yeah, I have similar, but that's awesome. I'm glad you pointed that out, and I want our audience to kind of take that to heart. Is because if you can measure it, right, you have to be able to repeat it. It's just basic science. It's if you go back to your scientific process that
Yep.
collecting data, you're pretty much doing mini experimentation. And so that kind of goes back to what you're saying, that the backwards process is like, okay, why are you measuring? You're trying to answer a research question.
Yep.
And that's really what it is. And in our case with the tactical populations, it's okay, why does sleep stink? Why aren't our guys getting quality sleep? Why aren't they getting enough vitamin D? Right? Little
Yep.
things like that. Is that you have your observation, you make a research question from that observation, your hypothesis, and you use the biowearable to collect the data to make an actionable plan out of that. It's the scientific process, and I love how you're implementing that.
Yeah. I do my best. Sometimes with the military, we can't do the scientific process. Unfortunately, it's more like, hey, let's do a control group and a group that doesn't do anything, and then we'll see what happens. And it's not like it's trying to do it the easiest way possible to get some other information. So
yeah, especially when you probably only have your hands on it for like 10 minutes a day.
it's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, consistency is definitely the issue with our population. It's great. So, with that, right? Where would you like to, if you had everything in the world and you had a blank canvas, where would you like to see data analytics go?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's already there. Do I understand it all yet? No.
I don't think any of us do.
Really, I mean, I think there's some amazing people out there that are doing some crazy, like we talked about making algorithms, doing machine learning, working on advanced AI to, predict outcomes.
Yeah.
That's where it's going, and that's where human performance needs to go to. So,
okay.
The problem I see with that in the human performance setting is everybody uses something different. So whether that be a force plate, which would be something you do jumps on if you're not familiar with it. Do jumps on, or you do like isometric pulls or other things. Like they're using different technologies, so it's giving different metrics. So especially working with the Army, it's like, do we all need to get on the same page somehow? But everybody wants to do their own thing because everybody thinks that everybody either has a relationship with this company, or they know about it, or they don't know about the other one. And so it's just like there needs to be somebody in leadership that just gets us all on the same page, so we can see. So we can correlate or not correlate, but we can see, hey, it's this group matching up to this group. Like, why is this group? Why is this unit different than this other unit? If they're doing different, if they're using different metrics, you're using different wearables. Like, let's say they're using one's using Aura and the other one's using Whoop. Like, those are completely different. I mean, they give you sleep, but like the accuracy of one is no offense, but greater than the other. I'm not going to say which one, but there's one of them is better through the research. So the other one, I think there's one that's, I think technology can improve, and like I try not to be a naysayer because I like technology might not be there yet, especially wrist-based technology. Just because it's hard for the sensors to penetrate all the bones and muscle and tendons in your wrist. I think the finger's better personally.
Yep.
But I think that with the military, especially like having a ring, you can't use a ring when you're you're actually deployed because you don't want to get degloved, which means lose a finger. So I think wrist-based technology is the way of the future. It's just not there yet in terms of the accuracy. So,
No, that's great. So honestly, I'm taking two things out of that. And the first big one, and I hope everyone caught that. You said do the research on the technology, and that's key. You have to get through all the hoopla and really see the accuracy of the biowearable. So, and like, for example, if you go into peer-reviewed research versus Aura versus Whoop, Aura has more peer-reviewed data confirming its algorithms, but whereas Whoop does not. And that's really interesting, right? And it's similar to other products as well, like the Dexcom CGM versus the Abbott CGM. The accuracies and interstitial versus sweat based analyte sensors, little things like that. So once you decide on the metric and the metric you want to measure, do the research on the biowearable that collects that metric. That's very key. You get past the hoopla, get past the relationships, get past the the commercialization, and get down to the nitty gritty. And I love the fact that you brought that up, and that's a key point. That's another golden nugget right there. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so might be a little controversial, especially people that are in the CrossFit community, because I know it's very popular, but some things I think it can be improved. That's it. So
agreed. Yeah. Well, part of it too is the at least in that aspect, that's the commercialization, getting into the middle of it.
They do a great job commercializing their product. And their app really cool.
It is, yeah. So it's I've had the same conversation with our guys, going through with when we were deciding to bring Aura versus Whoop in. It's the same thing too. Is we've had ketone companies come in and try to give us exogenous ketones, and that's a whole different subject to it for a different day. But you got to do your research, right? And that's why we developed a relationship with Delta G, is because that if you got to look at the research, there's over 20 years of research on that molecule that shows the performance benefits. Again, it's in controlled settings, but you got to do the research and get through all the hoopla. So, which is really cool. Yeah. So, I mean, we could just talk on and on about data. It's just like, I love the insights that you go into it. So what are kind of some of the steps that you personally do when you look at data for your, let's say it's a personal client or even a group? Take us through your process, just your personal process. How do you look at it? How do you interpret it? What type of methodologies do you use? Little things like that.
So if I'm working with the individual, which I don't really do that, since I'm not going to say like what level I'm at, but I'm not just at one unit. So, so it's more of a bigger picture aspect. So I don't work with individuals, but if I do, I do talk to people about sleep, and their data. Sometimes they'll come by my office, to that I don't step on the toes of the subject matter experts. I'll just talk to about the sleep metrics. I'm not going into how. I just got to be careful with especially with my job. So if they come to me outside of work, or if I have somebody come to me outside of work that I didn't work with, I would definitely give them my 2 cents on that. But so I'm really looking at, hey, what are the trends of the data? Like I think a lot of people get caught up in the acute data, like one day. It's just not it's not enough to make any type of decision on, whether that be anything, whether it be your heart rate one day, or your sleep one day, or your jump on the force play one day, or you talked about sweat, like measuring sweat, or anything. Like it's really just anything. One day does not tell you anything. It's just one day. So looking at trends over time, whether it be weeks, months, years, that's how I use my sleep data in particular. Like I don't look at my data every day. Some days I don't get good sleep, and I still want to work out, and I still think if I see it and it's like you're not ready to train, then in the back of my mind I'm going to be like, I'm not ready. I'm not going to, it's really how I feel first. So that's what I tell most people. Kind of go back a little bit. So what I would tell most people is how you feel is the most important thing. Having a blend of the subjective and objective information is very important. So then once we have that, then I'm going to look at a more practical standpoint would be like, what changes can you make from data. So the first thing I always tell people is like behavioral changes are the most important you can do.
Okay.
So a lot of people want the magic pill where it's like, just tell me what pill I need to take and I want to be better. That can work for a short period, and depending on your condition, like I'm sure it like can help people. But in order so we don't get there in the first place, behavioral modifications, whether that be practicing different sleep hygiene or stimulus control, or going to a CBTI expert that can practice sleep restriction based on their what the person needs, and then maybe get into nutritional aspects of what can improve that data that we're looking at. And then if we're looking at, strength conditioning data, whether that be a force based or, velocity-based training or whatever, like what can the strength coaches do to improve that? And what can they, how can they change the programming to benefit that?
Excellent. I mean, key thing, trends. I love it. I mean, because trends and, and then also looking at the subjective and objective data. Yeah. I mean, I personally, I'm a Aura guy. Mindset. I had the best sleep score I had in weeks. They gave me up to a 91, and I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm going to do a 10K run today, but man, I'm not fully feeling it. And getting up to 5 miles tempo pace, I'm like, all right, we're going to have to break this last mile up. And it was just, you're right. It's like how you feel is the most important aspect. And I think that's key. And that kind of goes back into a soft skill that we've kind of discussed in our previous podcast as well, is listening to the patients, right? We get, as professionals, we're looking at the folder like, okay, we got da-da-da-da-da-da. All right, you've got this, but you didn't really hear what the patient had to say. And so that's really key. And I love the fact that you bring that to the table when you talk to your clients or groups as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you just said, like, listening to the client, listen to the patient or the client, developing that relationship is the most important. And sometimes like, I'm sure like when I go to the doctor's office, the doctor sometimes is either like really engaging or they're not, because they have already so many things on their plate that they're looking to do. So I would say if you can just like try to be present in the moment and focus on who you're seeing, and what their issues are, like you said, like having the conversation is going to be huge, because I would suspect a lot of people that are trying to be doctors are doing it for the best reasons, but some people are maybe thinking more of the bottom line than so I would hopefully most people that work in any profession are doing it for the right reasons and not just for as many people as possible, making as much money as possible.
True, very true. So kind of winding down here, and you mentioned sleep hygiene. You and I know what sleep hygiene is. It's a kind of a big term that's being used in the tactical populations right now. Can you define that and give some examples of what sleep hygiene is?
Yeah, so sleep hygiene to me is basically anything that can improve sleep. And I think people get things kind of mixed up a little bit. I like to talk about sleep hygiene differently than I do stimulus control. So stimulus control is a cognitive behavioral therapy type of process before you go to bed. So I want to get into that first because I think that's where you get the biggest bang for the buck. So stimulus control, the best thing you can do every day is waking up at the same time every morning.
Okay.
And the reason we do that is because anybody familiar with ATP or a product of ATP, adenosine, is going to be, we build that up during the day. That's our sleep pressure chemical. So let's say we wake up the same time every day at 7 a.m. We start building up that sleep pressure, and then it builds up to it until we're tired enough. Then we go to bed, and then we release it. It's like you think of floodgates opening. We're releasing that adenosine, and then by the time that finishes, we're waking up. We're ready to go. But change their schedules. Like let's say they sleep in till 9 or 10 on the weekends. They're not building up that adenosine. They're missing out on 3 hours of that adenosine buildup. So the next night they're not going to be as tired. So that depends on if they drank before or whatever the night before. They might still be tired, but the most important thing you can do, and I'm sure a lot of sleep scientists and sleep experts would agree with me, would be waking up at the same time every day. Going to bed only when you're sleepy. Don't try to force yourself to go to bed. Like you're just going to cause undue stress. Use the bedroom for only sleep and sex. So no video games, no TVs. If you're going to read a book, try to read something either that's not going to stimulate you or Like a lot of people say read manuals, or I read fiction before I go to bed, and sometimes maybe it gets pretty exciting, but most of the time I'm only reading like a couple pages. So, and then another thing would be like really try to, coordinate your naps where you're not going to affect your sleep. So 15 to 30-minute naps are okay. But anything over that, you're gonna lose some of that adenosine because you're asleep, and so you're not going to be as tired when it comes to bed because you haven't built up enough. So be really careful about your naps. And for somebody that's just starting this, it's going to be probably difficult at first. You're going to be a little tired because you're trying to get yourself in sync. But that is going to be the most important thing you can do. And then the second thing when we talk about sleep hygiene, that's just going to be some more simple things. So that can be anything from like blackout curtains to white noise machines to what you eat prior to bed, like are you meditating before bed, something like that. Like it could be a million different things. Your temperature, 65 to 68 degrees is like there's maybe minus a couple degrees depending on people's opinions and some of the research, but would be optimal temperature for before bed. So I know a lot of maybe a lot of husbands, like since guys are generally sleep a little harder than women do, put your wife into, hey, like let's turn it down because it's optimal for sleep, So that might be a difficult conversation to have. But those are the differences. Is like, and they're most of them are behavioral changes. Now I did talk about nutrition, like maybe not eat a bunch of fat before bed or have a big meal because your body's going to be digesting and not really get into that good parasympathetic state where you can actually fall asleep and actually give you that restorative sleep. So those are kind of the differences. But I would say the stimulus control would be the biggest bang for your buck, and you can just Google that. And it's basically 4 to 5 things that you can hammer home. That's really important. Oh yeah, and one more thing with the stimulus control, if you have a partner, if you have somebody sleeping in bed with you, no arguments in the bedroom. All right. So the bedroom's your happy place. Like I said, sleep and sex only. Yep. So arguments should be done outside, whether it be the living room or another bedroom or something that you can just have the conversation, but really try to work on no stimulus that's going to make you anxious or angry in the bedroom. That's going to help you a lot.
Excellent.
Well, that'll be my answer. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. I mean, that's spot on. That's exactly what we talk about with my guys too when we do the one-on-ones, when we look at the sleep data too, is okay, how do you go to bed? What are your patterns? What are your behaviors? The favorite is the phone and eating literally right before bed, because you definitely with tactical populations, nutrition is less than optimal, and it's usually they eat breakfast and then dinner right before bed, because they're out in the field or doing stuff throughout the day. And try, if you can try to get that within, if you can eat, like you said, not a lot of fats and such, and definitely not a lot of carbs either within 90, before that 90-minute window before going to bed, you're really good. Because again, it comes down to glucose stabilization.
Yep.
That's a big one. So that's powerful stuff. I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, that's something that our audience should be, can actually try at home to help optimize their sleep. And so, yeah. And honestly, within this conversation, it's been great. You give them some great tenets, but you've brought to the table, you've been able to talk about 2 different domains of human performance at one time, and you start showing how you're able to link them over, because recovery is important. Data is another. And you're, in my opinion, you're able to show how you're able to cross those over to help optimize an important section of performance optimization for your personnel. So thank you for sharing those insights.
Yeah, you're welcome. I love talking about it. So sleep is 100% my passion, and something I really like to learn about and talk about.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, you talked about TBIs. That's something that's dear and near to me. We'll talk that at a later day. I want to have you back because there's so much more we can unpack in just out of this 40-minute conversation. But if you'd like to come back, I would love to have you.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, because I know there's some more research coming out of Fort Benning right now, and definitely IHMC as well. And kind of talk that a little bit, geek out a little bit more on TBI research. But so trying to recap on some of the stuff that you covered today. So you talked about how you use data to kind of process decision making. But before you got into that, kind of the key things you hit on is what metrics are you using to answer what question, right? That's the big one. And you talked about that doing the research on the biowearable, on the metric that you want to collect, and then really looking into that metric that is actionable, repeatable, and scalable. And so if our audience takes anything from all this, take those 5 points home and try and start looking at how you start using data just with your own studies. And when you start talking to your clients, your patients on a day in and day out basis. So with that, Jacob, I mean, there's a lot here. I want to have you back. Before you go, do you have any last minute advice for our audience out there?
Yeah, I would say, since this is directed towards residents and up and coming medical students, take care of yourself. You should be getting sleep. You should be taking care of your body. You should be eating right. You should be sleeping. You should be exercising. Personally, I would trust a doctor way more if they're physically fit than somebody that's not. So I think, and I also think that I've had friends that are medical students and that have become doctors, and they have stressed themselves out so much that now they're making awesome money, but their quality of life's not great because they didn't take care of themselves. So in order for you, just like working with whether it be special forces or big army, like, you will have a longer career and a more satisfied life if you take care of yourself physically and emotionally and mentally. So I think that's something I would definitely drive home. That's very, very important.
Excellent. That is great stuff to hear. So with that being said, that's this episode of WCW. If you have any questions or anything out there, feel free to reach out to me, Chris. And if I can't answer it, I will definitely get I'll get the question off to the question off to Jacob, and we'll kind of get that answered for you. So, Jacob, thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you again soon. All right, cheers. The views expressed by myself and the guests of this podcast do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.